I'm Veronica Dudo. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, growing response. As the war with Iran enters its fifth day, Western leaders are starting to weigh in the message they have for the U.S. and Israel. Pushback on the Hill, what Democrats are doing to try to curb the use of military force in the Middle East. Religious freedom. A new report out today looks at the state of believers across the globe. We break it down. Plus, Lenten journey.
It's a symbol of us on our earthly pilgrimage towards heaven.
How American seminarians studying in Rome are taking part in ancient tradition. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of Saint Casimir. Our top story tonight. New images out of Iran show the extent of damage from military strikes by Israel and the United States. And today, the U.S. military says one of its submarines has sunk an Iranian warship. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says it's the first time a ship has been sunk by torpedo since World War II. The vessel was in international waters in the Indian Ocean. It sank near Sri Lanka, just southeast of India. The island nation says it has recovered 87 bodies and rescued 32 people. Our colleague Rodi Sher is in Erbil, Iraq, where a missile has struck a special site for the local Christian community.
I'm standing in Ankara, Erbil, inside a small chapel in Blessed Michael Magivny apartment complex known locally as Magivny House. The Chaldean Archdiocese of Erbil says this building was struck at about 8 p.m. local time tonight in what appears to have been a drone attack. This is not just an apartment building. The Archdiocese says it has been home to workers and young Christian families, including families affected by Iraq's earlier year of violence. Church officials say the building had been largely evacuated several days earlier because it's close to Erbil International Airport. They also say a nearby convent of the Chaldean Daughters of Mary Immaculate suffered damage. No casualties are believed to have occurred. We spoke earlier with Archbishop Bashar Warda, who said to us attacks like this are a reminder that in times of war, the marginalized people are often suffer the most. And he also is asking the world to remember Iraqi people in prayer, especially at these special moments. For EWTN News, this is Rodi Sher.
As the Trump administration relentlessly goes after Iranian targets, President Donald Trump's war secretary emphasizes America is winning decisively, devastatingly, and without mercy. Pete Hegseth addressed reporters today at the Pentagon, and Caroline Leavitt took questions in the White House briefing room. One big question, how long it will last. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
And Veronica, late this afternoon, President Donald Trump holding a roundtable meeting with some high-tech executives. He said we're doing very well on the war front. On a scale of 1 to 10, he says a 15, adding this.
When crazy people have nuclear weapons, bad things happen. So we're in very good shape now. I want to let you know that, and we will continue forward. But it's a great display of military strength.
And an update on the war from the Pentagon. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says the combination of U.S. and Israeli forces has caused sheer destruction for Iran.
They are toast, and they know it.
Hegseth says the U.S. and Israel will have uncontested airspace.
Iranian leaders looking up and seeing only U.S. and Israeli air power every minute of every day until we decide it's over.
General Dan Kane says the U.S. is ramping up precision attacks.
Iran, on the other hand, has been indiscriminate and more imprecise in their attacks. They fired more than 500 ballistic missiles and more than 2,000 drones, striking innocent civilian targets throughout the region.
In the White House press briefing room, Caroline Leavitt addressed reporters.
With respect to munitions, ammunition, weapon stockpiles, the United States of America has more than enough capability to not only successfully execute Operation Epic Fury, but to go much further. And we have weapon stockpiles in places that many people in this world don't even know about.
One military analyst criticized the campaign, predicting that even after establishing air superiority,
but they're going to go underground. These are tough, resilient people. They're going to be able to outlast us. And if we think we're going to be able to bomb them into submission from the air, somebody's smoking something.
Hegseth insists Iran cannot outlast us, and he wants to keep the enemy off balance.
The only limits we have in this is President Trump's desire to achieve specific effects on behalf of the American people. And that's why we don't talk about, you can say 4 weeks, but it could be 6, it could be 8, it could be 3. Ultimately, we set the pace and the tempo.
The Pentagon adds we're punching them while they're down. Iran's capabilities are evaporating by the hour, and arriving today, more bombers and more fighters. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Joining us now is Janitin Saya, a research analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. It's great to see you again. Now, Iran has fired on multiple countries across the Gulf region, including allies. How is this impacting their standing among other Middle East countries?
Well, Tehran's perception for the longest time has been by internationalizing the war and by regionalizing their war efforts, they'd be able to inflict more cost against the United States and Israel by dragging more countries into a situation that they do not want to be in. But that really strategy has been backfiring. What we've seen so far is that countries that have been neutral around the Persian Gulf specifically, especially an entity like Qatar that has been really warm with the Islamic Republic, is now firing back against them, of course, diplomatically, is cooperating more with the US coalition. So we're seeing more and more isolation by the Islamic Republic by countries that were at one point neutral, if not friendly, with the regime in Tehran.
Now, the Turkish government, they even said that NATO anti-missile systems destroyed a ballistic missile fired by Iran earlier. How likely is it that both Gulf and European countries will join the U.S. and Israel in the fight against Iran?
European countries have already stepped in. They're intercepting Iranian projectiles in the skies of Jordan and Bahrain. That said, they have not really initiated any strikes within Iranian territory, and that would be a new effort. So far, what we've seen from Europeans is that they've either sought to appease the Islamic Republic or they've been using some back-channel negotiations, trying to signal something different to Washington. I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. Similar to the Persian Gulf states, they're worried that if they were to get more involved in this conflict and the regime were not to collapse, then they would have to sit next to a rival adversary that is increasingly more hostile.
Now, you recently wrote an article saying that despite the success of Operation Epic Fury, the regime has not been destroyed. Is that still the case? And if so, why?
Absolutely. So when we talk about the supreme leader being done, and when we discuss the heavy, devastating blow against their ballistic missiles and their launchers, we're not talking about the regime itself. We're talking about its capabilities. So it ultimately comes down to what next phase of the war is going to look like. As the president initially noted, the first really chapter is going to be targeting the military capabilities, and then we would be pivoting towards signaling to the Iranian people that are standing by for a U.S. and, of course, opposition calls for protest so they can take to the streets. That would be the main, game changer on the ground. Because as the president noted, ultimately it's up to the Iranian people to do the final knockout. While Washington is facilitating the conditions, it is really up to the masses, led by the Crown Prince, to really push this regime towards its collapse.
Iran's Assembly of Experts could announce the appointment of a new leader soon. Who do you think it might be chosen?
So far, it looks like it's going to be this former supreme leader's son, which signals to us two main takeaways. Number one, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the main military body of the Islamic Republic that is a designated terror group, is now increasingly looking at hardliner entities to really signal to us that the regime is not going to back down. That is the main takeaway here. The other aspect here is that the Islamic Republic has always sought to portray a fake image of democratic values, but now they're going down the hereditary path of having succession go down the bloodline. They have to answer their own population as to why they overthrew a monarchy for them to be implementing the same policies. So on two fronts, both internally and regionally, it seems like they're taking a much more firm stance. We have not seen any sign of compromise from the regime in Tehran, which is indicative of how paranoid they are and how close they are to collapse.
Janitin Saya, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
In Congress, lawmakers are going on the record about the war in Iran. The Senate blocked a war powers resolution aimed to rein in President Trump's authority to conduct the war without congressional approval. And tomorrow, House lawmakers will have their say with a war powers bill. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has been gauging the temperature among lawmakers and joins us now. Eric.
Well, good evening, Veronica. Yes, things are certainly heating up here on Capitol Hill as the finger pointing continues. Now, these war power resolutions, although it failed in the Senate, one of them, they do aim to stop President Trump's military campaign against Iran. But Republicans say that what Democrats really have to realize is that our adversaries are watching this and loving this division. It's not just Iran, but China, Russia, they all want it to continue, and they say Americans need to present a united front. However, the chief sponsor of the bill, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, says it's Congress's responsibility to okay a war and claims it's spelled out in the Constitution.
You're getting all kinds of rationales that are being expressed. And that's why you bring something like this to Congress and you have a debate and you decide if the rationale is worth risking troops' lives. We've already lost American sons and daughters in this.
But Republican Senator John Kennedy says while he understands Democrats' concerns, he adds the Constitution allows the president to strike foreign nations without involving Congress.
Every president that I can remember has defended our country's interests when it was necessary by bombing other adversaries, bombing our adversaries, and that's what the president's doing.
Kennedy adds, without sharing too much classified information, he says Iran was on the verge of not only attacking the U.S., but also increasing its stockpile of missiles and control of the Middle East. Other Republicans say Democrats just hate President Trump.
The reason they're raising it is because it's President Trump. He has the full authority under the Constitution as our commander-in-chief to engage in this operation in Iran.
Thursday, the U.S. House will vote on a similar Wars Power Act. Democrats even sent a notice whipping for their members to vote for limiting President Trump's efforts.
It's important for us to take the step that is in front of us right now, which is to work to make sure that the War Powers Resolution, which is bipartisan in nature, passes on the House floor today. Every member of Congress needs to go on record.
I think passage of a War Powers Resolution right now would be a terrible, dangerous idea. It would empower our enemies, it would kneecap our own forces, and it would take the ability of the U.S. military and the commander-in-chief away.
I spoke with House Speaker Mike Johnson after that hearing, and he actually says that lawmakers are waiting for the White House to formally request emergency cash to support the war. Some say that it could be up to about $50 billion more. Also, there's a group of House moderate Democrats that have introduced their own war powers resolution, and this one would call for an end of military operations in Iran within 30 days or less, provided that Congress authorizes a declaration of war. Now, this would give President Trump a little bit more time to finish Operation Epic Fury. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
The Trump administration is ramping up its fight against drug cartels with a new military push in South America. U.S. Southern Command has launched joint operations with Ecuador and European Union Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation, known as Europol, targeting designated terrorist organizations within the country. While the Pentagon has not yet released details about specific targets, both nations are promising decisive action. This recent effort follows the White House's Operation Southern Sphere, in which 151 people died while allegedly operating drug smuggling vessels across the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly. Religious freedom. A new report out today looks at the state of believers across the globe. We'll discuss. And Texas primary election results. Who won the key races? In Texas, the high-stakes primary saw unprecedented voter turnout from both parties. But one of the races isn't quite over. On the GOP side, a heavyweight clash is set for May. Incumbent Senator John Cornyn is headed to a runoff against Ken Paxton after neither cleared the 50% threshold. Meanwhile, in a major upset, conservative challenger for a House seat, Steve Toth ousted Representative Dan Crenshaw. In the race for governor, Greg Abbott has secured the Republican nomination nomination. He is expected to face Democratic nominee Gina Hanoso in the general election this November. For the Democrats, James Tallarico has claimed the nomination for U.S. Senate, stopping short of a victory lap until every vote is counted.
The number of young people who showed up to vote in this election is unprecedented. The number of Texans who have never voted before but showed up in this election is unprecedented. The number of independents and Republicans who voted in this Democratic primary is unprecedented. This is proof that there is something happening in Texas.
In North Carolina, the stage is set for a massive Senate showdown. Former Governor Roy Cooper easily clinched the Democratic nomination Tuesday, while Trump-backed Michael Whatley secured the Republican nod. The two will face off in November to replace retiring Senator Thom Tillis in a race that could determine which party controls the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom released its 2026 report today, and its findings are concerning. They recommended redesignating 18 countries for particular concern, the last designations taking place in 2023. Nigeria was the only country officially designated with CPC status by the president in 2025. Afghanistan, India, Libya, Syria, and Vietnam were suggested for CPC status for the first time, while groups like Boko Haram and the Houthis recommended for entities of particular concern. Joining me now to discuss is Nadine Maenza, co-chair for the International Religious Freedom Roundtable and former chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Thanks so much for coming back. Now, can you share with us some of the most important takeaways from this year's report?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear from looking at this report that's only been out a few hours that religious freedom is threatened throughout the world. I mean, they especially point out, government repression continues to increase, and we're seeing a lot of non-state violence against religious communities. And of course, the report opens talking about Nigeria and the horrific violence and how over 53,000 Christians have been killed since 2009 there.
Now, the State Department has not yet filed its religious freedom report. Do we know what the Trump administration is doing to aid some of the countries of most concern, as well as refugee replacement?
Yeah, so there's a lot that we haven't heard since they haven't released a report. And Biden was late in releasing the report his last year, and then the Trump administration has also delayed the report. So we are waiting for designations from the State Department. But nevertheless, USCIRF makes some really important recommendations to the President, Secretary of State, and Congress in this report. And hopefully, they will take a look. I think, it's so important to elevate religious freedom in foreign policy. They, in their opening as well, talk about Syria and how we have seen, the rise of violence against the religious communities there. And they have recommended Syria be a country of particular concern this year, which it was recommended as a special watch list country last year. But I think using, future, U.S. security assistance and bilateral trade being tied to religious freedom, being able to bring religious freedom into the foreign policy space and make sure countries know that they can be rewarded by the support of the United States. There's a way that we can speak into this to incentivize better behavior from a lot of these countries. Some of these countries that are some of the worst we've seen are strong allies of the United States. Others, of course, like Iran, are not. But we have influence with a lot of these countries like Nigeria, like Pakistan, like Saudi Arabia, and we should be using it.
Now, of course, we are following everything that's happening with Iran, and the world is watching the war in the Middle East. Yesterday, we spoke to a Chaldean archbishop in Iraq on the situation for Christians there. Christians are already under attack in the region. Will Christian persecution rise as a result of this war?
Unfortunately, we have seen with Syria, the Al-Hol camp that was filled with ISIS families, over 20,000 were released just within the last few weeks. So we've seen an increase in ISIS attacks on that side. So whenever there's chaos, whenever there's security and governance gaps, usually bad actors fill those. And since we do have so much chaos on both sides of the border for Iraq, it is for both the Yazidis and the Christians a really terrible time. In fact, we just got word just a little while ago that in a Chaldean, some of the housing actually was hit by some of the the bombings that were striking the Erbil Kurdistan region of Iraq area. So it is a difficult time for all the people in that area, but of course the vulnerable minorities have less places to flee. It's more difficult for them when they find themselves once again trying to relocate.
Nadine Manza, thanks so much for being here and giving us more information on this important story.
Thanks for having me.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, spiritual mystery. Pope Leo reflects on how the Church unites its human and divine dimensions. Plus, learn about an ancient Lenten tradition that continues to inspire modern pilgrims in Rome. Highlights how the Church is generated by God's plan for humanity and that its human and divine dimensions coexist without separation and without confusion.
Comunità terrena e corpo mistico di Cristo.
At his weekly general audience, Pope Leo continued his series on the Second Vatican Council, emphasizing one of its principal documents, the dogmatic constitution on the Church, Lumen Gentium. He said the Catholic Church is both a community made up of fragile and limited human beings and a divine reality. The Holy Father explained that this is what constitutes the holiness of the Church, the fact that Christ dwells in her and continues to give himself through the smallness and fragility of her members. During Lent, an ancient tradition is being carried out in Rome. The Station Church's pilgrimage dates back to the 4th century. Pilgrims visit specific churches each day for Mass. The Pontifical North American College has played a central role in this revival by organizing a daily English language Mass every Lent since the 1970s. EWTN News Vatican correspondent Valentina Di Donato has more on this story.
It's dawn in Rome. The city begins to stir. Bells echo down cobblestone streets, and at the Pontifical North American College, a different kind of morning rush is underway. Seminarians tighten helmets, check tires, and start to move, by foot, scooter, and bike. They're heading out on pilgrimage. Seminarian Thomas Malone smiles as he welcomes us.
Well, welcome to, this is the North American College, so.
Thomas is the bike crew leader, and today EWTN has special access to ride alongside the seminarians on a Lenten tradition the college has revived, the Station Church's pilgrimage.
So, yeah, right now we're headed to the bike garage. So we have a garage, we have a kind of a fleet of bikes that we have as seminarians that we use to go get groceries and go to Station Mass and go to other kind of places in the city.
But this isn't just transportation, it's transformation. When Thomas arrived in Rome a year ago, he had no idea this tradition would become the heartbeat of his Lent. He grew up an avid biker in Reno, Nevada.
I had no idea. And I think it's one of the little things that God kind of built in to surprise me, which is kind of cool and, just another way to, I think, give myself to him just because I love riding bikes, but being able to do it and go kind of every morning to with the Station Churches.
The daily pilgrimage route cuts through living history, past the ruins of the Roman Forum, alongside the towering Colosseum, before arriving at ancient basilicas where martyrs are buried and mosaics shimmer in the early light.
And then you have an ancient mosaic and a place that the martyrs are buried and you can pray with them. It's just super powerful.
The wind rushes past as the bike crew weaves through narrow Roman streets. Among them is John Ungarino from the Diocese of Austin, Texas. And for him, this daily pilgrimage has reshaped how he sees his vocation.
I would say it puts things into perspective, just regarding treating the everyday life as a pilgrimage, entering into the kind of daily penance of life.
Today's destination, the Basilica of St. Bartholomew, on the Tiber Island, where the relics of the Apostle St. Bartholomew are venerated. Inside, the basilica is packed. University students, Roman families, religious sisters, priests, and seminarians fill every pew. Gregorian chant reverberates off the stone upholding this living tradition. Seminarian Michael Anktel, the Station Mass cantor, says the pilgrimage begins even before they enter the church.
I was also struck this morning by the sky. The pilgrimage is a more ancient Christian tradition than even the station mass. And it's a symbol of us on our earthly pilgrimage towards heaven. And that's another pilgrimage we're on during Lent, coming to these station masses day after day on our journey towards Easter, when we celebrate again the risen Lord who came out of love for us.
In a city layered with centuries of faith, these young seminarians are rediscovering an ancient path, one that began with the early Christians of Rome and now continues through the revival led by the North American College. In Rome, Valentina Di Donato for EWTN News Nightly.
A new chapter for the NYPD spiritual leadership. Cardinal Timothy Dolan and Reverend A.R. Bernard are now at the helm of the department's multi-faith chaplains. Sworn in this Wednesday, the duo will guide a diverse clergy team dedicated to supporting officers and staff across all faith traditions. Their mission is to provide comfort and counsel to those who protect the city. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.